Bill C-6, an act to amend the criminal code regarding conversion therapy, is set to come back into the House of Commons next week and be debated by members of Parliament. And in advance of that, ARPA Canada has spoken to a number of Reformed pastors and other pastors across the country, just asking them how concerned they are and why they are concerned about Bill C-6 and really how it's going to impact their ministry. We have for you in this video Pastor Paul Dirks. Paul Dirks is the pastor of the New West Community Church, and he has been very much following this topic of gender and sexuality conversion therapy bans for the past number of years. He even presented to our Canadian Senate on Bill C-16. That was a bill that added gender identity and gender expression to the Human Rights Code. Pastor Paul Dirks is going to share with us why he's concerned about Bill C-6 and how it's going to impact his role as a pastor in New West.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I think that one of the challenges for people is that, as we saw with Bill C-16, that there's ambiguity around some of these laws, and so then really the horrific implications of them don't start to be seen perhaps for a little bit of time, and in some cases politicians may give assurances that that do not align with the bill itself, and then we see those things just be blown out of the water, as we've seen with Bill C-16 recently. In a BC court, there was a judge that stated that it was family violence for a man to call his biological daughter his daughter. So some of these things aren't worked out later, and people need to understand that sometimes the legislation is passed first and the implications worked out later. And there's a couple of really crucial and very horrific, I think, implications for pastors about this. One is when it comes to counseling. And I know friends that have detransitioned, along the way through pastoral counseling. They've come to a pastor and, as identifying as a man, even though they're biological female, and saying, listen, help me. And they got help, and now they're doing really well with the Lord, and as a woman, and self-identifying as a woman. And personally, I've had situations where people have come to me and said, listen, here's my experience, and I firmly believe that my current homosexual impulses are related to homosexual child abuse that I underwent when I was young. And this kind of legislation is going to limit that, or maybe even completely rule that out. And that's a horrific thing. You're talking about the vulnerable that need access to godly counselors and to the truth of God's word. The other issue, though, for me is maybe a bit of a more public one, and that is that as preachers, we need to proclaim the full counsel of God, and that includes stating, what is sin against God's law. That includes showing what is the goodness of God's law, and how God's law leads to human flourishing and goodness and beauty and all these things that have to do with a right conception of our gender and our sexuality. And so I'm very concerned, especially with now how so much is online, and I don't think that's a bad thing, but I'm concerned that the government will be enabled through this law, and perhaps others that will be built upon it, to actually condemn and perhaps even criminalize our preaching in the church, because it's public. There's been some scary precedents that have been set even very recently with a church in Regina that the pastor is facing a human rights commission complaint, a human rights complaint. So there's some really scary things going on here. And if this passes, I fully expect that I will be ticketed or in jail within 5 years. And so I think Christian pastors and Christians more generally need to wake up and see what's going on.
Thank you very much for that, Pastor Paul Dirks. And as you, our listeners and viewers, can observe, there's much to be concerned about here. And so please watch for ARPA Canada channels in the next few days as we release more of these videos, and also put specific action requests to you in regards to this bill as it makes its way back into the House of Commons.